I'm sitting in front of a virtual background of a 1950 structure that my architect father, Richard Neutra, designed. He was very interested in the physiological impact of designed environments on the inhabitants. In 1953, he wrote a book, Survival Through Design. So I got interested in that. I was 12 years younger than my next sibling, so effectively I was an only child. So I was kind of around adults a lot. I read this book, I got interested and decided that I wanted to go into medicine and neuroscience as a result of that. Went to Pomona College and then to McGill Medical School. One summer I went out and helped on a research project that compared Navajo people who had epilepsy with those who had conversion reactions or hysteria, looking for cultural patterning in that. Then I discovered that as the Vietnam War was heating up, I had the option to serve in the military, to work in the Indian Health Service, which is part of the U.S. Public Health Service. I worked for 2 years as a general doctor on the Navajo Reservation in a place called Crown Point. In the afternoons, I was a public health officer. I did tuberculosis control, VD control. They sent me to a course in Denver to learn more about tuberculosis control, and it was a week-long course. And one of the days was devoted to epidemiology. And I said, this is what I want to do. And I think the reason for it was that I kind of grew up in a intellectual environment critical of the status quo. So it fit for me. I did a master's, and then I realized that I really needed more, and there was an opportunity to get into the doctoral program, which I did. Somewhere along the line, I had met John Goldsmith, some kind of meeting that John was convening on epidemiology and policy when he was on leave to NIH. And I had written an article on unintended injury, accidents in environment design. The Nixon administration thought that you could have prefabricated housing. Just around the time that Ralph Nader had written his book, Unsafe at Any Speed, where poorly designed cars had created problems. So I thought, well, here's an opportunity where you're prefabricating buildings. You could be paying attention to potential of avoiding injuries. And I did a review of what we knew about the impact of the environment on injuries. So I came to that meeting and met John, and we kind of hit it off. And when I was going out to see my fiance in Berkeley, I mentioned that I would be there, and he said, well, why don't you come and we'll invite you as a visiting scholar to the California Department of Public Health. He was back there then. He was, I think, thinking ahead that he was getting close to retirement, and he was hoping that I would maybe come and take his place. Now, at that point, it was a very much reduced unit. There was only about 13 people, I think, from something that had been a very vibrant place before Ronald Reagan got a hold of it and cut budgets and so forth, and had really moved the entire Department of Public Health to Sacramento, where he could keep it on a short leash. So I had that experience, but I was looking to continue in academia and looked at a number of different positions, and one of them was at UCLA as an associate professor. So I took that position, and my new wife moved down from Berkeley. There were a series of public health crises towards the end of the Brown administration that meant that suddenly, as happens in government, if there's a problem, say that you're going to do some research, there was an opportunity to build back this program again. And I think there were 5 or 10 positions. And I realized that even though I wasn't interested in being the administrator of this division, that this was an opportunity to build this program back again. We had weakness in the area of toxicology. We needed to build up our epidemiological capability because people were demanding that we do studies around hazardous waste sites and various problems like that. Richard Jackson, who was a young physician epidemiologist fresh out of CDC working on pesticides, and John Harris, a physician epidemiologist who was interested in birth defects, we sat down and said, this is what we would need. And as each new crisis evolved and people wanted to throw money at us, that's what we filled in. And we were involved in a number of high profile studies trying to evaluate the impact of things like medfly spraying, leaks of solvents into groundwater in Silicon Valley, a number of hazardous waste sites and chemical spill events. In the course of this, it became clear that there were always stakeholders around these issues who had an interest in what the results should be. It happened that the Reagan administration was not at all interested in pursuing what they saw to be trivial risks from environmental hazards. And so, both in occupational and environmental things, they abdicated the federal responsibility to develop standards for risk assessment. So early on, we developed that with Dr. Kim Hooper, who was a cell biologist who had gotten into toxicology. Myself and a chemist, Robert Stevens, took the lead in developing guidelines that the federal government had not developed. Then we ended up having a unit that was devoted to providing the toxicological and epidemiological basis for environmental standards. That was kind of my first decade at the California Department of Public Health. And meanwhile, John Goldsmith was in Israel helping with the new medical school there. But he would come back and forth to California because he had friends and so forth. And he would always drop in and we would give him an office. And at one point, we went out for lunch and he said, I really think that environmental epidemiology and exposure assessment has gotten to the point now that there's not enough room in the existing epidemiological societies meetings for our topics. And it would be a good thing for people in different parts of the world because he had been at World Health Organization, he'd been at NIH, he was a wonderful networker. It would make a lot of difference if the people who are doing this could meet also with people from the developing countries. We shared our knowledge. We had people from government and we had people from industry who were, well intentioned, and we had people from academia all meeting in one place. I really think that you should get this started. And because John had so many contacts, because he'd been on many national committees and so forth, he knew people in Minnesota, he knew people in Pittsburgh, he knew people in Brookhaven. He mostly, I think, began talking this up. And what I offered was the fact that I had a staff that could provide a home for this. And at that point, we decided, I think, to start it. And then I think the first meeting was at Brookhaven. A number of people came, and then it started taking off. At some point, we had a meeting in Jerusalem. Then it continued from there. Early on, Colin Soskalny was looking for a home of an epidemiological society that would be interested in some of the ethical issues. Some of the other societies were not so interested in doing this. We were, and so we provided a home for that. I was a founding president of the society. We were in a good position at that point to provide the staff facilities. And I guess I had some ambition for our department to be playing a role in this. We were just a state, but we're a state which has more population than many of the countries that were being representative. And then I thought it would be a good thing for our staff to have this outlet to cooperative research and opportunities for people. Nobody else was going to be was clamoring to do this. During my life, there have been a number of things in which there were lots of obstacles, but I don't remember this as having any obstacles. We were filling a felt need, both for the government scientists who wanted to have a venue in which the work that they were doing could be discussed with colleagues, for the young academic people, and then for people in the other countries to have a chance to meet face to face with some of the people whose papers they had read. So it was always a very convivial and positive experience. I sort of left because I had retired, but then I sort of re engaged. I think there was a meeting somewhere that it would be fun to go to, and I went and attended the ethics committee. And I guess I just joined the committee. I was participating and coming up with ideas for seminars that we would have at the various meetings. And then I said, okay, I'll take over, and I did it for a few years. During that time, we went over and renewed the ethics guidelines that Colin and the committee had originally come up with, and then Colin and a representative from Nigeria were very active in that. Then we had a number of workshops. The final one that I was involved with in Utrecht 2 years ago was devoted to what we were seeing was different ways of thinking of the toxicologists and the epidemiologists, and what they were using, what their criteria for causality and for credibility. And that was, I thought, a really interesting meeting that we had there. I'm now very busy setting up something called the Neutra Institute for Survival Through Design, which is a nonprofit that my dad started. So I'm probably not going to be coming to any more ISEE meetings or being active. But if I was, I would still try to push the society in the direction of linking with some of the societies that actually look at policy, and maybe even having joint meetings occasionally with them or workshops with them. I would like to see the society push to have policy courses as part of the epidemiological training, that it's not just about gathering information, it's about thinking deeply about how these epidemiological facts fit into real life societal decision making, and maybe even to some extent, I guess it's the politics, if you like, around making decisions that require epidemiological input. John Goldsmith was very savvy. He said, one of the great powers of being in government is that you can convene people in a way that you can't do out of academia so easily. And I think that that is an area of possible creative activity.